Welcome to our Good Friday reflection. This morning I would like to talk to you about the comparison between the ill-fated expedition of Scott of the Antarctic in January 1912 and the courage of the men that went with him. But I'd also like to talk about the courage of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane and how he knew what was to become of him. In Belfast there are numerous walks, bus trips and displays, and indeed exhibitions in museums, all to commemorate the sinking of the great liner, the RMS Titanic. But indeed another tragedy took place in 1912, the death of Robert Falcon Scott and his loyal, courageous men in the Antarctic. These men had tried in vain to be the first to reach the South Pole. We all know the heart-wrenching story of Lawrence Oates. Seeing he had no chance of survival and not wanting to be a burden to his friend and companion Robert Scott, he decided to leave their last protection from the howling, freezing storm that had set about them. Leaving his shoes behind, he left with those famous last words, "I am just going outside, and maybe sometime." What courage, what self-sacrifice. How can we imagine what he was thinking? He was probably already suffering from severe frostbite, in considerable pain, through lack of hot food and hot drinks. Hypothermia would have already been convulsing his dying frame. But nevertheless, why did he not cling to the last ebb of life with his friend and choose to die together with someone he respected and admired? But no, he chose to die alone, collapsing somewhere in the frozen waste, never to be seen again. What a horrible end for such a loyal and courageous man. As for Robert Falcon Scott and Dr. Edward Wilson and Lieutenant Henry Bowers, what terrible end was in store for them? Before Oates had left the tent, he passed on his diary to Dr. Wilson, asking him to give it to his mother on their return. It was believed to be Lawrence Oates' birthday. Robert Scott had also severe frostbite in his right foot, and knew his foot would have to be amputated if he ever did get back to life. Wilson and Bowers, although not in good shape themselves, knew they had to get to the next supply depot if they were all to survive. But they didn't go. They were trapped by the raging storm, and so they stayed together in the tent. Wilson and Bowers wrote some short, sad notes to family and friends. But Scott wrote many letters to family, sponsors, contacts, the press, and the public. Scott's last diary entry was on March the 29th. It read like this: "Every day we have been ready to start for our depot, 11 miles away. But outside the tent remains a whirling drift. We cannot get through it. We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weak, and the end cannot be far away. For God's sake, look after our people." Soon after, they were all dead. Their bodies were found by a search party on the 14th of November 1912. All 3 bodies were found in the tent. Scott had been the last to die, his face twisted in pain. How awful this whole expedition had been. Like the Titanic would be in a few weeks' time. Questions would be asked. Why had Scott not taken husky dogs that were used in extreme conditions? Why had he not set off earlier, when the weather would have been less erratic? But no, Scott had made a number of decisions that were to cost himself and his companions their lives. Just as in the Titanic, there had been many errors made there. Lifeboats, bulkheads, not taking any notice of ice warnings. It shows that sometimes men cannot make the right decisions. But once again we hear of the courage and selfless acts in time of tragedy. Scott and his party had been very brave men, with great courage. And this great courage goes back centuries. Jesus showed great courage when he rode on his donkey into Jerusalem. Here was a brave and committed man. He did not need to go to Jerusalem. He knew it would end in his death. But the tremendous courage of Jesus can be seen not only in his actions, but in his teachings as well. His teachings are as uncompromising as his life. There was no question on his mind as to the popularity or the unpopularity of what he felt he must say. And he did not hesitate to speak his mind. He spoke out against the false, no matter how highly placed. This must have helped to seal his fate. We have to understand that Jesus was a grown-up man and a leader, dealing all his life with fundamental human problems and giving help, love and advice whenever he could. We cannot imagine now how difficult this must have been for him. He never wanted to fail in the tasks put before him. We cannot imagine ourselves faced with the same problems. But we can grow in his spirit of faith, and by applying them to the smaller problems which we encounter, to follow the path he showed. When we talk or are reading about Jesus, what kind of man do we picture him to be? What do we each see in our mind's eye? Do we see a man such as Scott or Oates? Men of medium stature, bearded, lean and fit. Bright eyes, full of knowledge on the tasks ahead. Or do we get our images from the stained glass windows we have seen? A small, thin, bearded man, although early pictures of Jesus always showed him clean-shaven. Painters have always made him look rather weak and sometimes effeminate. And in some pictures he looks very dour indeed. He does not look as if many people would have followed him at all. However, we do not know, and will never know what he looked like. But we do know he was brave and courageous, and someone we should admire. Like Lawrence Oates, Jesus stepped outside for a moment on his own. Not in the cold and ice of the Antarctic, but in the Garden of Gethsemane. He wanted to be on his own. He knew the storms were gathering about him, and that the authorities of the temple were just waiting their opportunity to seize him, and if possible, put him to death. Jesus wanted this time alone, so that he could get the strength and courage from God, and to be able to meet without flinching whatever fate was in store for him. He knew the blow must fall soon. He had gone too far to escape now. The quiet of the garden was suddenly disturbed by the noise of many feet and rough voices of a crowd. Did he run? Did he hide? No, not Jesus. He went to meet his accusers. None but the bravest of men would have done that. But Jesus had courage. His belief in God had singled him out. Believing God had given him a task, and knowing that God was at his side, how could he be a coward? As he said at the last, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit." Amen. John will now close this Good Friday reflection with a hymn. We will now close with the benediction. O God, look graciously upon us all. Give us thoughts that pass into prayer, prayers which pass into love, and love which pass into life, this day and always. Amen.